Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down my top 30 wide receiver rankings and tiers for the 2023 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below while you're down there. Whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton if you want to follow me on Twitter or X. Please do so at NotoriousFantasy, and let me know down below in the comment section who your top 5 wide receivers are for the 2023 fantasy football season. So without further ado, let's get into my top 30 wide receiver rankings and tiers for the 2023 fantasy football season. We begin in the S tier at number 1 with Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings, underdog ADP wide receiver 1 at pick 1.1. He was the wide receiver 1 in PPR last season and the wide receiver 2 in PPR points per game, finishing 1 spot behind Cooper Kupp. He played in all 17 games last season, finishing first in targets, receptions, as well as receiving yards. The only category he didn't finish number 1 in was total touchdowns, with 9 ranking 4th. He was 8th in yards per target, 3rd in yards per team pass attempt, and 1st in total route wins. The reason why I believe Justin Jefferson can repeat as the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football is because of the team he is on. The defense of the Minnesota Vikings is absolutely atrocious. So under Kevin O'Connell, their head coach, they have to throw the ball at a much higher clip. The defense is going to be getting its back blown out, and Kirk Cousins and friends are going to have to march down the field repeatedly late in games, giving the extra added upside to Justin Jefferson to get some points at the end of the game when they're trying to chase back down another team like DK Metcalf chased down that Cardinals defensive player. I am so excited about Justin Jefferson this season. I'm not going to sit here and give him some metaphorical gawk 9,000, pull his pants down for him for 5 minutes. We all know how great Justin Jefferson is. At number 2 in the S tier, we got Ja'Marr Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals, underdog ADP wide receiver 2 at pick 2.2. It is important to note that there is definitely an asterisk when ranking Ja'Marr Chase because we don't know the full story when it comes to Joe Burrow's health. Zach Taylor yesterday was asked a question about Joe Burrow, and he did the Matrix move, right? He completely dodged the question. He basically said a whole lot of nothing. If Joe Burrow, by the time you go to do your fantasy draft in late August, early September, is good to go for week 1 with no setbacks, then Ja'Marr Chase is the clear number 2 wide receiver. But if there's more question marks and you start questioning things, you might want to throw Tyreek Hill over him. Ja'Marr Chase was the wide receiver 3 in PPR points per game, the wide receiver 11 in PPR, because he only played in 12 games, 11.2 targets per game, 7.3 receptions per game, 87.2 receiving yards per game, and 9 total touchdowns, 4th at wide receiver. He was 10th in dominator rating and 7th in target accuracy. Obviously, being the number 1 wide receiver for Joe Shiesty, Joe Burrow, is going to do you wonders, assuming that Joe Burrow is actually healthy for week 1. Again, if that kind of continues to be a question late into August, early in September, I think I'm going to have to move Tyreek Hill ahead of him. Speaking of Tyreek Hill, wide receiver of the Miami Dolphins, my number 3 wide receiver, underdog ADP wide receiver 3 at pick 4.3. He was astonishingly the wide receiver 2 in PPR and the wide receiver 3 in PPR points per game, despite the fact that a lot of people thought that without Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill was going to be dead in the fucking water, sleeping with the fishes like Luca Brasi. And even with Tua only playing 12 games last season, Tyreek was still a top 3 wide receiver at the end of the season, as well as in points per game. And without Tua, things went wrong for Tyreek, right? He didn't score a single touchdown in 5 games without Tua. So if Tua is able to stay healthy this season, the ceiling is legitimately wide receiver 1 in fantasy. 17 games played last year, 3rd in targets, 2nd in receptions, 2nd in receiving yards, and 4th in total touchdowns, 3rd in route win rate, 6th in yards per target, and 2nd in true catch rate. The untapped potential of this offense is very high. 2nd year of Mike McDaniel, 2nd year of Tua in this system. Again, if Tua really is able to stay healthy this year, it wouldn't shock me at all if Tyreek was the number 1 wide receiver. To close out the S tier, we got another guy with a bit of an asterisk, Cooper Kupp of the LA Rams, underdog ADP wide receiver 4 at pick number 5. The asterisk comes from the fact that he's dealing with a hamstring injury. Now, right now, it doesn't seem like you need to worry in early August, but if it continues, the days keep building up and he's still not back at practice and you start to panic, then maybe it's time to move Cooper Kupp down the rankings. Right now he's coming off the board as the wide receiver 4 at pick 5. I'm still fine doing it, but I also want to make a note that you don't really want to be chasing injuries in fantasy football. I talk about this in a lot of my mock drafts. The injuries are going to find you. They are going to club you in the back of the head in a back alley, and they're going to take all your money. They're going to take your phone. They might even steal your fucking Jordans from you on your feet, right? This is a situation that scares me right now. Now, I'm not in full DEFCON 5, I'm not in full panic mode, but I am definitely starting to worry. When Cooper Kupp was healthy, he was the best receiver in the NFL last year. Wide receiver 1 in PPR points per game. He only played in 9 games, and he was still a top 24 wide receiver on the season. He had 10.9 targets per game, 8.3 receptions per game, 90.2 yards per game, and 14 total touchdowns. He only had 1 drop on the season. He was number 1 in dominator rating, 18th in target accuracy, and 11th in target separation. If Kupp's good to go in a couple of weeks, full steam ahead for Cooper Kupp to potentially finish as the number 1 wide receiver, but there's certainly some reasons at least to worry a little bit right now. Moving to the B tier, we got 2 wide receivers, beginning with Stefon Diggs of the Buffalo Bills, underdog ADP wide receiver 5 at pick 8.1. He was the wide receiver 4 in PPR and 5 in PPR points per game. Now, it's important to note that after Josh Allen got banged up, I know that he didn't miss any games, but it was very clear that Josh Allen was not the same guy after that injury. Now, obviously, that injury didn't happen in week number 1, but it is important to note because I think Stefon Diggs' ceiling was kind of taken down by Josh Allen's play. 5th in targets, 3rd in receptions, 5th in receiving yards, and 2nd in total touchdowns with 11 in 17 games. 6th in yards per pass attempt, 17th in yards per target, 9th in fantasy points per target, and 4th in fantasy points per route run. It could be argued that Stefon Diggs should be in the S tier with the other guys. I just think there's a much better chance that one of those top 4 guys finish as the wide receiver 1 compared to Diggs or Davante Adams. But again, this is not to diminish, to hate on Stefon Diggs, because he's going to have a great fucking season as well. I just have him ranked slightly below the S tier guys. Speaking of other guys that I just have, ranked slightly ahead. We got Davante Adams at wide receiver 6. A lot of people are preying on this man's downfall of the Las Vegas Raiders. There are people telling me that Davante Adams is going to suck a big hog this season. Wide receiver 10 on our dog fantasy, pick 14.7. The fact that this man isn't a top 12 pick in fantasy football drafts is hilarious. He dominated 50 Shades of Grey style. He was bending defenses over last year with Derek Carr, who played like dog shit, was so bad that he got benched for Jarrett Stidham, and people are worried that Jimmy Garoppolo isn't going to be good enough for Davante Adams. I know Jimmy Garoppolo might be a great-looking man. He used all of his skill points in good looks, didn't put too many of them in his NFL passing skills, right? But he is good enough for Davante Adams to finish as a top 8 wide receiver. So why is he coming off the board as the wide receiver 10? He was 2nd in targets last year, 7th in receptions, 3rd in receiving yards, number 1 in total touchdowns, doing that with the 69th highest target accuracy. Very nice, I like it, but in reality, I don't like it. But Jimmy Garoppolo isn't much worse than that. 2nd in dominator rating, 5th in total route wins. He was the 3rd wide receiver in PPR last year, wide receiver 6 in PPR points per game. I am tired of people dragging Davante Adams' name through the mud. I am ecstatic for how he is going to show the haters up this season. Moving now to the B tier, we begin at number 7 with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I moved Amon-Ra from wide receiver 9 to wide receiver 7. Again, they're all still in the same B tier, all the same guys, him, Lamb, and A.J. Brown. So don't try to throw stones at me for ranking Amon-Ra higher. I just legitimately think this guy might see the most targets in the NFL this year. Underdog ADP wide receiver 8 at pick 13.5. Wide receiver 7 in PPR. Wide receiver 11 in PPR points per game. This is a team for the first 6 weeks without Jameson Williams. I legitimately think Amon-Ra St. Brown could get 12 or 13 targets on average over those first 6 games. 16 games played last year. 8th in targets, 5th in receptions, 10th in receiving yards, and 20th in total touchdowns. Jared Goff is a better quarterback than people give him credit for. Amon-Ra St. Brown was 9th in target accuracy. I think that the Detroit Lions are going to be a great offense week in and week out. Their defense is pretty so I think that's going to help out Amon-Ra in this offense to have to throw the ball a lot deep in games. Now, I know the touchdown stat isn't sticky. I know it might be unlikely that he scores 10-plus touchdowns, but what happens if he does, right? What happens if David Montgomery isn't the next Jamal Williams, doesn't score 17,000 touchdowns? Maybe they start throwing a little bit more in the red zone, and that helps out Amon-Ra St. Brown a ton. I think this guy's an incredibly safe option because of the amount of targets he's going to see, but I think he has a lot of upside as well because I think he's just a great wide receiver. He's not just catching the ball and falling over. He can run great routes. He can run really fast as well. I'm super excited about Amon-Ra St. Brown this season. I think people are sleeping on him even at wide receiver 8 off the board on Underdog. At number 8, we got CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys, Underdog ADP wide receiver 7 at pick 11.6. He was the wide receiver 5 in PPR last year and the wide receiver 7 in PPR points per game. CeeDee has continued to get better and better every single year since his rookie year. 17 games played last year. He was top 5 in targets and receptions, 4th, 6th in receiving yards, and number 4 in total touchdowns, 8th in route win rate, 7th in dominator rating, and 8th in juke rate. I think the Dallas Cowboys offense is going to be really solid again. They play in a softest baby shit conference of the NFC, which I think will help out this offense even more. CeeDee Lamb played pretty well last year, even though Cooper Rush was the starting quarterback for the first couple of games of the season when Dak Prescott was injured. So I think CeeDee Lamb's upside is pretty high. Again, he is an incredibly safe option with top 5 upside. Any of these guys in the first couple of tiers, I would say the first 4 tiers, the S, A, B, and C tier, I am incredibly confident in. I believe they're all uber safe options. At number 9, we have A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles, Underdog ADP wide receiver 6 at pick 9.9. Last year, we all somehow galaxy brained ourselves out of drafting A.J. Brown, despite the fact that he was on a great offense with a great offensive line. I know Jalen Hurts was a little bit more unproven than he is now, but still, it was kind of obvious that he was going to be great. He was dominant in Tennessee, but we were kind of nervous last year, and he just made everyone who faded him look like a bozo. Wide receiver 6 in PPR, 8 in PPR points per game, playing in all 17 games last season, top 12 in all major categories, 8th in targets, 11th in receptions, 4th in receiving yards, and 2nd in total touchdowns, 2nd in yards per route run, 4th in yards per target, and 5th in yards per reception. A.J. Brown has that game-breaking potential. We saw it last year. I believe it was up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. If it wasn't, don't sue me. But you remember the game where he scored all those touchdowns. He was pointing at the corners as he was mossing them, being like, you're an idiot, you can't stop me, you can't do this, you can't do that, throwing in some expletives, I would assume, as well. I'm a huge fan of A.J. Brown. I think the consistency is somewhat of a question mark because of the fact that DeVonta Smith is there, but he's also not uber inconsistent. I just think that CeeDee might be a little bit more consistent, but if you're talking about the higher upside week in and week out, I think A.J. Brown has that like 35-plus point potential that maybe CeeDee might have this year, but isn't a guy that I would be shocked if CeeDee ripped off like 4 games with over 30 points, whereas it wouldn't shock me if A.J. Brown did the same thing. Moving now to the C tier, Jaylen waddled away, waddle, till the very next day of the Miami Dolphins, Underdog ADP wide receiver 11, at pick 17.3. He was the wide receiver 8 in PPR last year and the wide receiver 13 in PPR points per game. Another guy, got to throw the asterisks on him. He did get banged up in their training camp practices versus the Atlanta Falcons yesterday. Doesn't seem like anything serious. I'm not full on panicking even as a Dolphins fan, but it's important to note that maybe this injury could linger, it could impact his week 1 status, and then you'd probably definitely throw Garrett Wilson ahead of him in the rankings, because again, you're not trying to chase injuries, because the injuries are going to find you whether you like it or not. Wide receiver 8 in PPR, wide receiver 13 in PPR points per game, 17 games played last year, 24th in targets, 23rd in receptions, 7th in receiving yards, and 11th in total touchdowns. He was 1st in yards per target, 1st in yards per reception, 3rd in fantasy points per target, and 10th in route win rate. Now, Tyreek Hill was definitely affected with versus without Tua, but Waddle was hit over the backside of the head when you look at his numbers of with Tua versus without. With Tua, he was averaging 7.3 targets per game, without 5.8. With Tua, 4.7 receptions per game, without Tua, 3.8. The yards, it becomes very clear. 89.1 yards per game versus 57.4, and the touchdowns as well, 0.7 touchdowns per game, 0 without. So it's clear that the upside of both Tyreek and Jaylen Waddle is capped by Tua. If Tua is able to play all season long, I think both of these guys could finish as top 5 wide receivers. Before we pivot into the final wide receiver in the C tier, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. If you're brand new to Underdog Fantasy, they are the best place to play fantasy football, best ball this summer. If you don't know what best ball is, it's the best part about fantasy football. It's the draft, and that's it. You do your 18-round draft, there's no waivers, there's no trades, and there's no in-season management. Because at the end of every single week, Underdog automatically puts the highest scores into your lineup for you. And they have the biggest fantasy football contest ever. Best Ball Mania 4, $25 to enter, 150 max entries, $15 million in total prizes, $3 million to first place. Now, if $25 to enter a tournament seems like a little much for you, they're also going to have smaller contests they drop all the time, like the Puppy, $5, $3 contest, $7, $10 contest. And if you're not a tournament kind of person, they also have regular leagues, basically. You versus 11 other people for as low of a buy-in as $3. The top 2 places make money. So if this sounds fun to you, make sure you click on the link in the video description or use promo code Notorious if you are new for a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. So you deposit 100, they give an additional 150, additional 50, 25, and additional 25. So back into the C tier with Garrett Wilson of the Jets. I think Garrett Wilson's ADP is going to start having a NASA blast to the moon because of Hard Knocks. We've talked about this before. I've been talking about this for years. There is the Hard Knocks bump that happens to players. Fantasy players start to really like these players because they see them all the time, and then Garrett Wilson will move up. Now, Garrett Wilson is deserving of potentially being a top 10 ADP player. He's wide receiver 9 on Underdog, pick 13.8. I have him as wide receiver 11, but that's not way off of where he's coming off of the board. But I do think his ADP might keep creeping up. He might creep up into being a super early second-round pick in most drafts because he's on Hard Knocks. Now, again, it's not undeserved. Wide receiver 21 in PPR last year, 31 in PPR points per game. He was 6th in targets, 16th in receptions, 14th in receiving yards, and 37th in total touchdowns with absolute idiots as the quarterback. Like, let's just be honest. Mike White, Zach Wilson, cool Joe Flacco. Garrett Wilson had the 90th highest target accuracy, and he was 19th in total route wins. I genuinely believe that if Aaron Rodgers is even half the guy he was in those MVP seasons, if he's even just as good as he was last year, which wasn't great, based upon Garrett Wilson's skills, it should be a shock to no one if he finishes as a top 12 wide receiver. Moving now to the D tier, we got Calvin Ridley. He's been a big riser in my rankings, now in the top 12. My first guy in the D tier, Underdog ADP wide receiver 15 to pick 27.8. I know there are a lot of people that don't like Calvin Ridley. They're nervous about the age. They're nervous about him coming back. Well, I've seen a lot of Jaguars players basically metaphorically sucking this guy off, giving him the gawk 9000. I've watched the training camp clips. It looks like he never left. His last season was in 2021, but he only played in 5 games, so we're going to hop in the DeLorean back to 2020 for what he could do on a full season. This is with Julio Jones. And not the Julio Jones from the last, couple years. Julio Jones, one of the best receivers in the NFL. Calvin Ridley was a top 5 wide receiver in PPR and points per game. He was 7th in targets, 11th in receptions, 4th in receiving yards, and 9th in total touchdowns, 7th in yards per route run, 9th in fantasy points per route run, 21st in target separation. He is now in a great Doug Peterson offense with Trevor Lawrence, who continues to make strides. Obviously, Urban Meyer completely butt-fucked his rookie year, but now he has a real head coach, and Trevor Lawrence T-Law is looking incredible. Calvin Ridley's the number 1 wide receiver on the team. Trevor Lawrence made Christian Kirk look like the second coming of fucking Randy Moss, so I fully expect Calvin Ridley to have a fantastic season. At number 13, we have DeVonta Smith of the Eagles. Underdog ADP wide receiver 13 at pick 21.7. I moved Smith ahead of T. Higgins because I have came to a realization that even though I am all about safety early on, and I still believe T. Higgins is the safer bet than DeVonta Smith on a week-in, week-out basis, I don't think that with Jamar Chase healthy, T. Higgins will ever really be a top 3 wide receiver in any given week. Whereas I think even with A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith, because of how explosive this Eagles offense is, could do that. a couple of times in the season. Wide receiver 9 in PPR last year, 14 in PPR points per game, tied with Mike Evans. 17 games played, 13th in targets, 9th in receptions, 8th in receiving yards, and 14th in total touchdowns. He was 3rd in juke rate, 20th in dominator rating. The Slim Reaper himself is in a good position to repeat as a top 12 wide receiver in PPR. He's wide receiver 14 again in PPR points per game. I think it's pretty fair to rank him at 13. I guess you could rank him higher than Calvin Ridley if you want, but that's about as high as I would rank him because he's obviously the 1B behind A.J. Brown. Obviously, A.J. Brown in a vacuum is the guy you want in that offense, but DeVonta Smith also possesses that week-winning upside. T. Higgins, like I said, a little bit safer, right? Like wrapping that Trojan around your team. Wide receiver 14, pick 24.6. T. Higgins, when Jamar Chase is healthy, will probably finish every week from wide receiver 12 through 18. He's never really going to be the reason why you win, but he's also probably not going to sink your battleship, right, and be the reason why you lose a week. He was the wide receiver 19 in PPR last year, 20 in PPR points per game. Obviously, T. Higgins' ranking also is impacted by the health of Joe Burrow. If Joe Burrow is looking like, oh my God, maybe he misses a couple weeks, then Higgins' value definitely has to plummet. Even though he could finish strong at the end of the season, you don't want to have your wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 necessarily have his quarterback not be the starter for the first couple of games. And then maybe it continues to linger. It's just a situation you don't want to really be super in on at ADP. Now, his ADP would obviously plummet if that was the case. 16 games played in 2022 with 14 starts, 26th in targets, 23rd in receptions, 17th in receiving yards, and 14th in total touchdowns. I have no doubt that if Jamar Chase wasn't there, T. Higgins would be the clear number 1 receiver. He would be the number 1 wide receiver on a lot of offenses in the NFL. He was 16th in yards per target, 30th in yards per reception. Again, a great player, an incredibly safe option. But I decided to move him down my rankings due to the upside that I think the other players possess that I don't think T. Higgins has with Jamar Chase healthy. Moving now to the final player in the D tier, wide receiver 15, halfway through the video. Make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button down below. Chris Olave of the New Orleans Saints, underdog ADP wide receiver 12 at pick 19.5. Now, not a lot of people talk about the fact that the what if Michael Thomas stays healthy? Now, I know this is a huge ask, right? This guy gets hurt fucking lacing his cleats up. He gets hurt. He drops the soap in the team shower, fucking falls over and sprains every fucking bone in his body, right? But at the end of the day, what if Michael Thomas stays healthy? It doesn't have to be for the whole season. What if Michael Thomas plays 10 games? Is Chris Olave really going to finish as a top 12 receiver if that is the case? And the fact that Michael Thomas right now is healthy does scare me slightly. I still don't think Chris Olave is some bust that you can't be drafting. Far from it. But I have to kind of talk about the other possibility that maybe Chris Olave doesn't finish top 12 where he's coming off the board. Last season, his rookie year, wide receiver 25 in PPR, 27 in PPR points per game, dealing with Andy Dalton as the starting quarterback for a majority of games. 15 games played, 9 starts, 20th in targets, 26th in receptions, 17th in receiving yards, 37th in total touchdowns, 12th in route win rate, 18th in fantasy points per out run. Again, this guy is a really good player, but the Michael Thomas being there and maybe staying healthy for a lot of games does really scare me. I think that Michael Thomas, the slant man, the target hog himself, commands targets. He just does. Now, again, if Michael Thomas gets hurt, I'll look like a fucking idiot. But I don't think I ranked him way too low to where people will be like, Nick, you're so stupid for ranking Chris Olave there. I think if you understand what I'm saying, you will get why I haven't ranked at 15, but I know there's people that think that Michael Thomas is just going to never play a game in the NFL again, and if that is the case, if he gets hurt, lacing the cleats like I said, then Olave is going to move up the rankings 100%. Again, I kind of did shit on Derek Carr with Davante Adams, but Carr also isn't a terrible quarterback. Moving now to number 16 through 19 at wide receiver in the E tier, we got Amari Cooper of the Cleveland Browns, underdog ADP wide receiver 17 at pick 33.3. He was the wide receiver 10 in PPR last year and 18 in PPR points per game, playing in 17 games last season, 16th in targets, 18th in receptions, 11th in receiving yards, and 4th in total touchdowns. 3rd in unrealized air yards, which is important because I think if Deshaun Watson isn't a flaming pile of dog shit like he was last season, then a lot of those air yards might transition into real yards. Now, I don't think Amari Cooper's going to get close to 2,000 receiving yards, but I think he could get 1,500 maybe on a great year in Cleveland. third in dominator rating at wide receiver. So even with the topsy-turvy quarterback play last year, Cooper was still a great pick. And I think he's going to be a great pick again this season. Now, there's going to be people that think that Deshaun Watson is finished, dead in the water. He is finito. He's done. Dunzo, Gonzo will never be back to playing as a top 10 quarterback. If you believe that, then don't draft Amari Cooper. But I think that a lot of that rust is now gone. I think Watson is going to end up surprising a lot of people this season. I think where Amari Cooper is going off the board, he is an incredibly safe pick. Next up, we got Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers, underdog ADP wide receiver 21 at pick 41.3. Now, I talked about Watson in yesterday's video, league winners, and people were shitting all over me. They were talking about how Christian Watson can't do it. He can't be this league winner, can't be this top 12 receiver. Well, he was wide receiver 8 in PPR points per game last year when playing 60+% of the snaps, which is a 7-game sample size. I know his stats on the season, nothing crazy. 11 games started, 14 games played, 65th in targets, 64th in receptions, 52nd in receiving yards, 4th in total touchdowns, 7th in true catch rate, which is great. But he had the 41st highest target accuracy. Rodgers wasn't the same discount double check back-to-back Jordan 96-97 MVP that he was the 2 prior years. Now, he wasn't some schlub. He wasn't out there throwing the ball like Jamarcus Russell, but he also wasn't the same Rodgers we're used to. Now, I get Jordan Love might be worse than the Rodgers we got last season. He probably will be. But at the end of the day, Christian Watson is the number 1 receiver there. I've seen some positive reports out of camp pointing towards Christian Watson playing well with Jordan Love, having that great connection. I know they have Jaden Reed, they have Romeo Doubs, but I don't think any of those guys can even hold Christian Watson's jockstrap. I think it's very evident that he's the number 1 receiver and he has big play upside. He did it to my Dolphins. He did it in a bunch of games where he was scoring these touchdowns. Again, the touchdown number isn't sticky, but I do really believe that the targets are going to be there for Watson this season. I think Jordan Love is better than people are giving him credit for, and I think Christian Watson is sitting pretty at wide receiver 21. I got him ranked as wide receiver 17. I think he does have really high upside, though. Again, even this Packers team doesn't have to be really turning heads, and Jordan Love doesn't need to become the second coming of Aaron Rodgers for Christian Watson to have a great season. At number 18, we have Keenan Allen of the LA Chargers, underdog ADP wide receiver 19 at pick 36.1. He was the wide receiver 41 in PPR and the wide receiver 12 in PPR points per game. He played in 10 games last season, 89 targets, 66 receptions, 752 receiving yards, 4 total touchdowns. The efficiency stats, though, are where things start to look good for Allen, even in his older age. 8th in target separation, 11th in fantasy points per out run, 19th in true catch rate, 19th in rating per target. Now, there's people that like to throw the injury-prone rating, the injury-prone moniker onto Keenan Allen. Sure, he only played in 10 games in 2022, but before that, the last couple of years, 16 games, 14 games, 16 games, 15 games, 16 games. There was a point in his career, 2013 through 2016, where you could consider him being injury-prone. 15 games, 14 games, 8 games, then 1 game. But recently, he's played over 14 games every single year from 2021 to 2017. So I think that narrative that he's just going to get hurt is just not really the case, right? Obviously, anyone can get hurt, but Allen's an incredibly safe option on a high-octane offense with Justin Herbert the pervert. He's the clear number 1 option. I think Mike Williams' volume could decrease from Quentin Johnston being there, but I don't think it will impact Keenan Allen. I'm a big fan of this LA Chargers offense, and I'm a big fan of Keenan Allen. Closing out the E tier, we got DeAndre Hopkins of the Atlanta Titans, underdog ADP wide receiver 24 at pick 45.3. He was the wide receiver 10 in PPR points per game last year in Arizona, but was the wide receiver 47 in PPR because he only played in 9 games. On a per-game basis, he was averaging 10.7 targets, 7.1 receptions, 79.7 receiving yards, and he scored 3 total touchdowns. Again, oh my God, DeAndre Hopkins is getting older. Oh my God, I'm so scared to draft him. Oh man, I kind of sound like, fucking, what's the guy's name from Jimmy Neutron, the fat kid? Oh, Jimmy's mom, Carl Weezer. That's what I gotta sound like right there. But 4th in route win rate, 2nd in win rate versus man, 6th in dominator rating. DeAndre Hopkins still has it. I get Ryan Tannehill isn't the most sexy quarterback on earth, but the Titans offense is going to be able to move the ball. They got Henry. They got Hopkins. This team in the red zone is going to be bending teams over. I'm a huge fan of D-Hop this season, and I think a lot of people are scared because, oh my God, when Julio Jones went to Tennessee, everything went wrong. Let's be honest, it was kind of a little bit more clear that Julio was finished at that point compared to DeAndre Hopkins. I think D-Hop still's got a couple of years left in him. Moving now to the F tier, and these are the two players that I'm saying fuck it to. I have them ranked much lower than ADP. DK Metcalf of the Seahawks, underdog ADP, wide receiver 16 at pick 28.6, was the wide receiver 16 in PPR, 26 in PPR points per game, top 12 in targets and receptions, 15th in receiving yards, and 20th in total touchdowns. I will not deny at all that DK Metcalf isn't a great receiver. Like, if you think DK is a great receiver, I fully fucking agree with you. He looks like he was created in a lab. He's a creative player from Madden that you made as a kid, right? This brawlic man that is huge, but incredibly fast. But we got to talk about how there's clear issues on the team with how are you going to throw the ball to this many people? You got Metcalf, who even with just Lockett last year was wide receiver 26 in PPR points per game. Now imagine what's going to happen when you have Metcalf, Lockett, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. You have Kenneth Walker, you have Zach Charbonnet, you have Noah Fant. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And where DK Metcalf is coming at wide receiver 16, it's just too damn high. It is too high of a price to pay. Now, if he was coming off the board as like the wide receiver 20 where I got him ranked, or he's coming a couple rounds later, then yeah, I'm all about drafting that kind of a player with the high upside week in and week out, but kind of a lower floor. I'm fine with that. So if you want that, just wait a couple rounds and draft Lockett. Similar upside, both great players, but Metcalf is coming off the board a lot of time in the third round. Why the fuck am I going to draft him in the third round when there are much better options that go later than him? Again, to further reiterate, I don't think Metcalf's a bad player. I just don't like the situation, and I also think Geno Smith isn't that great, but the situation just propels him up to look like a better quarterback, which is fine, right? Fine for fantasy, but not the best for Metcalf. Moving now to wide receiver 21. Can you do something for me? Deebo Samuel of the Niners, underdog ADP, wide receiver 18, pick 34. Again, another guy that I'm convinced is really good, but is in too loaded of an offense, and the touchdown regression was blatant from 2021 compared to 2022. In 2022, this man scored 5 total touchdowns, 2 receiving ones, 3 rushing ones. In 2021, where he left an imprint of his ball sack on the defenses, 6 receiving touchdowns, 8 rushing touchdowns, 14 total touchdowns, which is almost triple. That was 4 fingers. Triple the amount of touchdowns they scored in 2022. Now, why might that be? That's because Christian McCaffrey is there. Christian McCaffrey is one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in the NFL. So why would Deebo score anywhere past 5 rushing touchdowns? And then, if he doesn't score 5 receiving touchdowns, he's not getting the 10 total touchdowns. And with George Kittle, and with Brandon Ayuk, and Deebo, and fucking McCaffrey, how can you be confident in drafting Deebo where you are? The quarterback situation is also kind of dicey. I like big cock Brock Purdy, but they could go with Trey Lance. If Purdy struggles, they throw in Lance, and then Deebo's upside goes into the garbage can. Wide receiver 37 in PPR last year, 28 PPR points per game, tied with Hollywood Brown, 37th in targets, 47th in receptions, 49th in receiving yards, 29th in total touchdowns. And again, while I think Deebo might be a little bit better than these efficiency stats say, stats don't lie. 82nd in route win rate, 75th in target separation, 88th in true catch rate. Not as good as you think. He's just not. Again, I'm not saying he's a shitter. He doesn't deserve money. He should just go play in the fucking Canadian Football League like Johnny Football did. No, I don't think that. But do I think that he is going to pay off at wide receiver 18? Fuck no, baby. Moving now to the G tier, wide receiver, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22. Jerry Jeudy. Now, this is a group of wide receivers that start to get real risky, but there's pretty high upside with them. Jeudy of the Broncos, underdog ADP, wide receiver 20 at pick 38.4, wide receiver 22 in PPR last year, 21 in PPR points per game, tied with Mike Williams. 15 games played, 32nd in targets, 30th in receptions, 22nd in receiving yards, 20th in total touchdowns, but his efficiency stats look good. 11th in dominator rating, 13th in quarterback rating per target, which is impressive because Russell Wilson looked like Stevie Wonder out there trying to throw the football. 19th in fantasy points per out run, 13th in fantasy points per target. Now, coming out of college, Jerry Jeudy was this top-tier upper echelon prospect out of Alabama. It hasn't necessarily panned out in the NFL. Now, again, he hasn't been terrible, but he hasn't really lived up to a guy like CeeDee Lamb, who's drafted in the same class, right? So you got an offense now with Sean Payton as the head coach, still with Russell Wilson. I trust this offense to bounce back. But I will note that there's been a lot of positive reports about Mr. Courtland Sutton. And I've been a Courtland Sutton truther my whole fucking life. So I still like Jeudy better. I do. I like how he played deep into last season. It was impressive. It really was. But there's definitely question marks with Jeudy. Is he the clear number one receiver? Is Russell Wilson not cooked? Are they not going to run the ball a lot because they have P. Ryan and Davante? If Davante is healthy week one, they might just run a lot. There's a lot of question marks. There's clear talent. That's what gets you knocked down here into the G tier. Number 23, Wiki, DJ Moore of the Chicago Bears, underdog ADP, wide receiver 26 at pick 47.4, wide receiver 24 in PPR last season and 33 in PPR points per game, tied with Christian Watson, Allen Lazard, and Mecole Hardman. 17 games played in 2022. He was 21st in targets, 37th in receptions, 26th in receiving yards, and 7th in total touchdowns. DJ Moore has been basically screwed his whole entire career by the quarterback play. He gets in Carolina not the super Cam Newton, right? He gets handicapped Cam, right? Not the same fucking Cam Newton you're used to. Yes, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield. He's had a bunch of PJ Walker, right? Not great quarterbacks. The quarterbacks of Panthers. Now he goes to Chicago. Now, obviously, there are still unproven aspects about Justin Fields. It's miles better ahead of what he had in Carolina. 97th in target accuracy for DJ Moore last season. 97th. And he still was a top 24 wide receiver in PPR. His upside is incredible in Chicago. I'm a big believer of Justin Fields. I like that the offensive line is better. Just hard to move him ahead of some of these guys that I've ranked ahead of him. Again, it's nothing wrong with DJ Moore. Nothing wrong with him. I really like him. But it's hard to keep pushing him up. Like, you could argue to put him ahead of Jeudy, but it's hard to rank him much higher than that, again, because the wide receiver position, very, very good in the NFL. Shocker, right? Now moving to wide receiver 24. Terry McLaurin of the Commanders, left hand up. Who are we? The Commanders. Underdog ADP, wide receiver 23. Pick 44.5. Wide receiver 14 in PPR, 23 in PPR points per game last season, tied with Michael Pittman, who we'll be talking about a little bit. 17 games played, 19th in targets, 21st in receptions, 9th in receiving yards, 29th in total touchdowns. This is another guy that has just been, his career has been almost thrown to shame by the quarterback. 61st in target accuracy. I know Sam Howell is not the best quarterback ever. I know this to be true, right? But it's not hard to be better than what McLaurin had last season. Eric Bieniemy, now the head coach, the offensive coordinator, with Riverboat Ron as the head coach. 7th in yards per target last year, 11th in yards per reception. This guy has the skills to pay the bills. He's a safe option, and I'm hoping the upside is better with Eric Bieniemy as the head coach, and hopefully Sam Howell comes into his own and plays really solid. At number 25, we have Deontay Johnson, the Steelers. Underdog ADP, wide receiver 29 at pick 56. I already know like half the comment section probably hates Deontay Johnson. That's been made very clear every time I make a video about Deontay Johnson. A lot of you guys got burnt by Deontay Johnson last season. You drafted him, and he fucked you over, right? He scored 0 total touchdowns. Now, he was 6th in targets, 13th in receptions, 27th in receiving yards. He played in all 17 games. He was the wide receiver 43 in PPR points per game, 28th in PPR. So I get why people are mad. They don't like the production last year. Maybe they don't like Kenny Pickett. But let's be honest. Since Deontay Johnson's been in the NFL, 2019, 16 games played, 5 touchdowns. 2020, 15 games played, 7 touchdowns. 2021, 16 games played, 8 touchdowns. 2022, 17 games played, no touchdowns. What's the difference? What's the difference? What happened? Is he just a bad receiver now? No, he just got unlucky. Incredibly unlucky. He was 2nd in unrealized air yards, 4th in juke rate, 11th in total route wins. Sure, he dropped 9 balls. He has a case of the fucking dropsies. He's just permanently going to have it. He's allergic to catching the ball sometimes, just like Julio Jones used to be allergic to scoring touchdowns. But at the end of the day, the targets are going to be there. George Pickens is not going to surpass him in targets. Kenny Pickett can only get better. It's hard to get worse than what we saw to Kenny Pickett last season. So I think it's wheels up for Diontae Johnson this year. I know people are going to be scared, but you like to chase volume in fantasy. And Diontae Johnson is going to be fucking sucking in targets like Mia Malkova is sucking on some schlong with some great technique. Diontae Johnson catches the ball with a pretty okay technique, but he gets a lot of targets. At number 26, we got Drizzy, Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons, underdog ADP, wide receiver 22 at pick 44.1. I have been in, out, up, and down, all on Drake London. I had, early on in the offseason, I was all over Drake London. More recently, I've started to backpedal a little bit because I'm worried about Desmond Ridder. I just am. I think anyone with a fucking brain would realize that, hey, maybe Desmond Ridder isn't the best. Now, I don't think Desmond Ridder's like garbage, but I also don't know how great he's going to be. And when you're drafting Drake London, that's the quarterback. Now, again, Drake London's a great fucking receiver. Amazing. In his rookie year, wide receiver 31 in PPR, 47th in PPR points per game, 15 games played, 22nd in targets, 26th in receptions, 28th in receiving yards, 37th in total touchdowns. Again, those stats are like, it's almost like Fugazi. It's almost fake because he's really good. It's just the quarterback play was subpar. So if the quarterback play ups, he definitely could be a top 20, top 18, 15-ish receiver, 100%. But if the quarterback play is subpar, I think that's going to hurt his consistency. Like Diontae Johnson is going to be way more consistent. McLaurin's going to be way more consistent. Maybe London has more huge game upside because I think he's a better receiver than Diontae Johnson or McLaurin. But the situation scares me significantly more. Moving to wide receiver 27, we got Michael Pittman Jr. of the Indianapolis Colts, underdog ADP, wide receiver 35 at pick 69. Very nice, I like. So when it comes to Michael Pittman, this is another guy that people just hate, right? They drafted Michael Pittman last year. Sure, he was top 24 in PPR, 23rd in PPR points per game, but he didn't reach that upside, right? Now, there's many reasons why he didn't reach the upside. For one, his quarterback, Matt Ryan, was like a fucking marionette out there. The whole team sucked ass. Everything went wrong for the Colts. Pittman was 11th in targets, 8th in receptions, 24th in receiving yards, and 4th in total touchdowns. 2nd in total route wins, 7th in route win rate, 17th in contested catch rate. Now, they bring in Anthony Richardson. I know, Nick, Anthony Richardson isn't the most accurate quarterback ever. He can't throw super deep, blah, 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 blah. Well, actually, he can throw deep, so don't say that. It's a egregiously wrong statement. But yeah, Michael Pittman isn't that great, blah, 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 right? Not Michael Pittman. I think he's great. Some people might not think he's that great either, right? They think Anthony Richardson isn't all that. Matt Ryan literally was so bad. It was hard to watch. Is Anthony Richardson going to be the second coming of Patrick Mahomes in year number 1? Of course not. But as long as he can throw the ball with an ounce of accuracy, Pittman's the clear number 1. Jonathan Taylor's holding out. Who knows if he even fucking plays this season for the Colts? They might have to throw the ball more than you thought. Again, this guy had 141 targets. Imagine if the quarterback wasn't dog shit. Pittman does have top 12 potential. I know some people won't like to hear that. They don't think Pittman's a good receiver. But you just have to take away what happened last year. Just thought about what this offense could be. The situation he's in. They have Josh Downs. They have fucking Alec Pierce. Jelani Woods. Mo Alley, Big Cox. Right? They don't have a lot of options. Pittman's the number 1. Chase the volume. Chase the volume with Michael Pittman. Moving now to the final tier, H tier, wide receivers 28 through 30. 28, we got Mike Williams, currently coming off the board as the wide receiver 25 at pick 45.6. People are going to hate this ranking. Or say Nicky's way too low. Well, I like this offense. I like the upside of Williams. He's never going to be consistent, which is fine. He has the big spike upside, but I think Quentin Johnston could carve a stronger role out early on in the season than people think, and I think if he's going to eat a slice of someone's workload pie, it is going to be Mike Williams, not Keenan Allen. He was the wide receiver 32 in PPR, 21 in PPR points per game, tied with Jerry Jeudy, 13 games played, 93 targets, 63 receptions, 895 receiving yards, 4 total touchdowns, 11th in contested catch rate, 12th in yards per target, 25th in yards per reception. Again, I don't think Mike Williams is bad. I think he's really good. But I just worry about Quentin Johnston cut more of a role. Austin Eckler's still going to get a lot of targets. Keenan Allen is a target monster as well. A lot of cooks in the kitchen. I think Mike Williams could be left in the dust. Again, not an awful pick at wide receiver 25. I think he could easily be that, but he's just not a guy that I'm elated to draft. At number 29, we got Kirk, Christian Kirk. Not talking about Captain Kirk, but maybe some people call him that. But in reality, that's Kirk Cousins' nickname. Kirk Go Chains, underdog ADP wide receiver 27, pick 50. He was great last year. I was shocked. Wide receiver 12 in PPR, 19 in PPR points per game. Doug Peterson completely changed this offense. I mean, Urban Meyer had Trevor Lawrence looking like he forgot how to play football. And then he just was so much better with Doug Peterson. Shocking, right? Because Urban Meyer's a fucking buffoon. 17 games played for Kirk. 15th in targets, 14th in receptions, 13th in receiving yards, 11th in total touchdowns, 15th in dominator rating. He did have a lot of drops, 8 drops, 7th, 28th in route win rate. Again, good receiver, great team, should be solid. Just nothing to write home about for me when he's on the team where Calvin Ridley is going to be the number 1 receiver. Again, I don't hate Christian Kirk. If something happens to Calvin Ridley, knock on wood, Christian Kirk could finish top 12. Wouldn't shock me in the slightest. But if we're thinking the running backs are going to start getting more targets, maybe Christian Kirk fades away a little bit more with the usage of Ridley so high. They also have Ingram. They also have Zay Jones. There's a lot of cooks there. Again, I don't think Christian Kirk's going to be a bust. I've drafted him before. I just feel like, hey, I got Christian Kirk. Again, it's just like with Mike Williams. These are guys where I draft them. I don't feel super happy about it. And I also don't feel like I just made a terrible pick. I just feel like, you know what? They're on my team. It is what it is. Wide receiver 30, Brandon Ayuk of the Niners. Underdog ADP, wide receiver 28 at pick 51.3. Wide receiver 15 in PPR, 25 in PPR points per game. 17 games played, 25th in targets, 18th in receptions, 21st in receiving yards, and 11th in total touchdowns. If I'm being honest with you, I think Ayuk might be a better receiver than Deebo, but I don't think he's going to get more targets than Deebo. 16th in total route wins, 13th in route win rate, 3rd in target separation, 7th in drops with 8. I think Ayuk is a great player. I don't want to shit on him. Again, it's just an offense with a lot of cooks in the kitchen that makes me kind of be more scared to draft them, especially when they're being drafted as highly as Ayuk. Again, he's a great player. He's in a great offense. If something happens to Deebo, something happens to Kittle, then boom, Ayuk could solidify himself as an upper echelon wide receiver option. The quarterback room is still kind of unsettled. Who knows who the starter will be week 1? I think it's going to be Brock Purdy, but who knows? I'd definitely rather draft Ayuk, though, than Deebo in terms of price, right? Ayuk is wide receiver 28 off the board. Deebo is something egregious, wide receiver 18. So 10 wide receivers later, you can get Ayuk. That seems like a no-brainer to me. So again, to kind of put a bow on things, with Williams, Kirk, Ayuk, I'm not jizzing in my pants when I select them. And I'm also not mad that I drafted them. They're just guys that are on my fantasy team that I think should be weekly starters, but aren't the guys that I see. I don't see them really, unless there's an injury to someone on their team, really being these super duper league winners. That's just kind of my thought process on it. So let me know what you thought about these wide receivers in the comments. You disagree with my rankings? You like my rankings? What do you think? They're still probably going to change by late August. Things are going to change. We'll keep updating them. There is going to be my rankings dropping soon. I will talk to you guys, I think after this weekend, probably on Monday, about how to get them. So I love you guys a ton. Make sure you guys click that like button, hit that subscribe button if you have enjoyed. I love you guys all a ton. Make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy. Link in the video description. Promo code Notorious for that first match deposit bonus of up to $100. I apologize, this video is really long, but I think I talked about all these players in depth. I hope it helped you. So I love you guys. Hope you have a great one. And as always, good boy.